The air at the Jerez doesn't smell like it used to. For 20 years, the paddock was defined by a specific sound, the high-pitched, screaming mechanical symphony of the four. It was the engine of legends, the heart of dominance and precision. But today, as the sun begins to bake the Andalusian asphalt, that sound is dead. In its place is a low, guttural growl that vibrates through the concrete of the pit lane. It is a sound that signals the end of an era and the desperate birth of another. Inside box 20, the tension is thick enough to choke. The blue shirts of the factory team aren't celebrating. They are hovering over telemetry screens with a look of quiet intensity. They have done the unthinkable. They have ripped out the soul of the M1 and replaced it with a V4 prototype, a configuration swore they would never need. But in the modern era of GP, never is a luxury they can no longer afford. The stakes couldn't be higher. This isn't just a mid-season test. It is a $50 million gamble to save a Japanese giant from fatting into irrelevance. And to tame this new, violent machine, they haven't just brought in their usual testers. They've summoned two of the most aggressive, unpredictable talents in the world of two wheels, the Turkish sensation and the Australian V4 specialist, Jack Miller. No one inside the paddock expected what would unfold over the next 48 hours. It was a session that would reveal the terrifying potential of the new bike, but also a technical nightmare that threatened to derail its entire 2026 campaign before it even began. But behind's calm, smiling expression, the pressure was building fast. For years, the world had wondered if the stop-and-go king of world could actually handle a prototype GP machine. Today, the world was getting its answer. Wasn't just here for a joyride, he was here to prove he could be the new face of. The Turkish rider is a statistical anomaly. He brakes later, harder, and more violently than almost anyone on the planet. But as he rolled out of the pit lane for his first flying lap on the V4, the reality of prototype racing hit him like a wall. The V4 engine delivers its power with a brutality that the 4 never possessed. It's a sledgehammer compared to a scalpel. "He's looking for the limit," whispered one observer at turn 1, but the limit keeps moving. Signature style, sending the rear wheel into the air under braking, is his greatest weapon. However, the V4's weight distribution is different. The center of gravity has shifted. Every time tried to into the dry hairpins of Jerez, the bike fought back. It wasn't just a matter of speed, it was a matter of survival. Yet the real turning point happened away from the cameras, deep in the data office. The engineers noticed something alarming. Whilst entry speeds were world-class, his corner exits were a disaster. The bike was fighting the electronics, bucking and weaving as the V4 tried to put 300 horsepower into the ground. Rumors began to circulate that was struggling with the Michelin trap, a phenomenon where the tire starts to spin and simply never stops. If he couldn't solve this, his GP dream would be over before the first race. Inside the neighboring garage, whispers began spreading about the man in the other seat, Jack Miller. If is the raw talent, Miller is the V4 whisperer. Having ridden the and the KTM RC16, the Australian knows more about V4 power delivery than perhaps anyone else on the grid. Didn't hire him just for his speed, they hired him for his brain. Miller is known as a rider who is hypersensitive to tire feel, a trait that makes him a nightmare for engineers but a godsend for development. As he climbed onto the matte black prototype, Miller wasn't looking for a lap record. He was looking for the ghost. In the world of GP electronics, the ghost is a glitch in the fly-by-wire system. On a V4, the connection between the rider's wrist and the rear tire is managed by thousands of lines of code. For this was a blank slate. 20 years of Force software was now useless. They were starting from zero. But as the afternoon progressed, Miller's feedback became increasingly frantic. He wasn't talking about grip or aero, he was talking about a total loss of control. According to insiders, Miller reported that the bike was refusing to give him full power on the straights. He was pinned open, tucking behind the bubble, but the bike was only delivering a fraction of its potential. Yet this was only the beginning of a far bigger storm. While the mechanics scrambled to find the software bug, the temperature on the track began to climb, exposing a flaw in the V4's cooling system that no one had anticipated. And from that moment, nothing would ever be the same for the technical team. The throttle ghost that Miller had identified wasn't just a minor bug, it was a catastrophic failure of the bike's internal mapping. Reports from the paddock indicated that at high lean angles, the bike was cutting power to just 25% throttle. Imagine entering a 120-mile-per-hour corner, needing the power to stabilize the chassis and finding nothing. It's a recipe for a high-side crash that could end a career in milliseconds. Miller, ever the straight shooter, was seen in a heated confrontation with a lead electronics engineer. The Australian's frustration was visible even through his visor. He was risking his life to test a bike that wouldn't even let him go fast. "You can't develop a bike you can't ride," Miller reportedly told the team. This technical dispute highlighted the massive rift between Japanese headquarters and the European-based test team. The Japanese philosophy is one of caution and incremental steps, But in the V4 era, you have to be bold. You have to be aggressive. While Miller fought the electronics was fighting the physics. He was pushing the tires, the rubber destined for the 2027 regulation change, to their absolute breaking point. Some mechanics claimed something felt off with the front-end stability. The V4's extra weight was burying the front tire into the tarmac. Every time tried to attack the apex, the bike felt like it wanted to fold. But what the Paddock discovered next shocked everyone. It wasn't the engine or the electronics that was the biggest problem. It was the shadow of a man who wasn't even on the bike that day. The pressure wasn't just coming from the bike, it was coming from the contract papers sitting in a drawer in. This golden boy and former world champion was watching this test from a distance with a skeptical eye. He had stayed with on the promise of this V4 engine. If this test failed, wouldn't just lose a race, they would lose their star. This created a toxic psychological environment in the garage. Every lap Miller turned was being compared to historical data. The media criticism was already mounting. Online debates were raging. Had waited too long, was the V4 too little, too late? Insiders suggested that the internal conflict within the garage was reaching a breaking point. There was a Group A who believed was the future, and a Group B who remained loyal to smoother, four style. The V4 prototype was caught in the middle. It was a bike built for two different masters. To add to the chaos, was seen lurking in the back of the garage. The veteran, brought in as a consultant, was seen shaking his head while looking at the braking telemetry. The data showed that while was a monster on the brakes, the bike's aero package was creating so much drag that it was losing 5H on every straight. However, the twist that followed would change the championship narrative entirely. Just as the team was about to pack up for the day, asked for one final run, not on the Michelins, but on the 2027 spec tires. Yet the real turning point happened away from the cameras during the final hour of the test. When switched to the tires, the Turkish gambler finally found his luck. Unlike the Michelins, which require a delicate touch and high corner speed, they are built for point-and-squirt riding. They are the tires used to win his world titles. Suddenly, the V4 didn't look like a bucking bronco. It looked like a weapon. Began to slide the bike into corners with a level of control that left the engineer speechless. He was using the rear tire to steer, pivoting the bike on a dime and launching it out of the corners. It was like a went off, said one mechanic. The bike finally made sense to him. But this revelation created a new problem. If the bike only worked on the 2027 tires, what would happen in 2026? Was facing a lost season a year where they would have the engine they wanted, but not the tires to make it work. The technical analysis was clear. The V4 had incredible mechanical grip, but its aero dependency was its Achilles heel. Every time followed another rider, the dirty air would cause the front end to oscillate violently. It was a severe setback in their aero development. They had the power, but they didn't have the stability. And as the sun began to set over the hills of Jerez, the final drama of the test was about to unfold. Jack Miller, back on track after a frantic software patch, was on a lap that was purple in every sector. He was chasing the Ghost, and he was finally catching it. But the Paddock Whispers were true. The V4 was still hiding secrets. As Jack Miller flew through the fast corner, the bike's stability was tested to its absolute limit. The Australian was leaning at 64 degrees, the titanium spark guards on his knees showering the track in light. The telemetry showed that for the first time all day, Miller had 100% throttle. The Ghost was gone. The technical team held their breath. If Miller could finish this lap, would have the data they needed to sleep soundly. He crossed the line and the numbers flashed up on the screen, a 1:36.8. It wasn't a world record, but it was competitive. It was proof that the V4 could live in the same world as the. However, the victory was short-lived. As Miller rolled back into the pit lane, he didn't celebrate. He climbed off the bike, sat on his toolbox, and put his head in his hands. The mental pressure of riding a prototype at its limit is staggering. He had spent 8 hours fighting a machine that tried to throw him off at every turn. The potential is there, Miller told the media later, his voice weary. But we are climbing a mountain with no oxygen. We've got the engine, we've got the riders, but the electronics are still speaking a language we don't understand. The test ended with more questions than answers. Had proved they could build a V4. They had proved they had riders who could push it. But they had also revealed a deep-seated miscommunication between their hardware and software that could take months or years to fix. What happened after that left even his closest team members stunned. As the garages were being packed and the bikes were being loaded into crates for the flight back to Japan, did something unexpected. He didn't go back to his motorhome. He stayed in the garage, sitting with the data engineers until nearly midnight. He wanted to know why the bike felt better on the. He wanted to understand the traction maps. This was the evolution of no longer just a stunted rider, but a true prototype developer. The final data from Jerez was a mixed bag of explosive potential and worrying turmoil. The combination of a V4 engine with tires showed a glimpse of a future where could once again be the kings of GP. But the road to that future is paved with severe high-speed incidents and technical disputes that are far from over. Didn't just change an engine configuration at Jerez, they changed their entire philosophy. They have embraced the chaos of the V4 era, but the weight of expectation is now heavier than ever. Will be the one to bring the glory back, or will the technical complexity of the V4 be the hard hit that finally breaks spirit? The 2026 season looms like a storm on the horizon. The paddock is watching, the fans are waiting, and inside the walls of the engineers are working through the night trying to tame the beast they've created. Because in GP, if you aren't moving forward, you're already forgotten. The revolution has begun, but as any historian will tell you, revolutions are rarely bloodless.